Good morning, everybody. Welcome to B4 Live. And today we've got Tony Hobbs joining us from Chapman, Robertson and Moore, talking about your key investment, your team. Tony? Earth calling Tony.
Hi, Richard.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Tony. Busy, no doubt, with all these various government schemes and new initiatives taking place, or have you been rushed off your feet?
Rushed off our feet.
Yeah.
It's still really busy and still trying to keep up pace with everything that's going on, because it's still changing at quite an alarming pace.
I mean, I know you're going to be talking about teams this morning, but just a quickie on this bounce back loan, how's that shaping up, and accessibility, etc.?
It's really interesting. I mean, your only problem is whether you can actually get online to make the application. But if you can get online and make the application, they're going through pretty quickly. I was talking to a few people yesterday who've had success with doing it, and it is a good infill for where the CBIL was falling down in certain areas. The bounce back, you know, if you want to borrow up to 50,000, you need business banking to connect into it. If you're on some of the corporate banking platforms, you won't be able to do it at the moment. But if you've got business banking, they're looking quite good.
Have you actually got clients that have successfully drawn down?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. Yesterday, we've also had some who had problems with just logging on and just not actually being able to get through, because there were so many people doing it. But it's just a case of keep on trying, because obviously it's going to get easier as time moves on.
Is it obviously it's a 24-hour thing, or is it? I don't know. I've not tried it, but I know we are looking at it. But is it something that is business hours, or is it 24? I know websites 24 hours, but how does it?
I'm not actually sure about that, because I'm trying to think when I was last looking at it yesterday. It was that probably was outside business hours, but I don't know whether it's 24/7.
No, fine, okay, brilliant. Well, thanks for joining us again, and thanks to everybody for coming on, and looking forward to hearing from Tony. As usual, we've got the chat function, so if you've got a question for Tony, please put it in the chat box. Do you want questions at the end, Tony?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah.
Either come on screen and ask Tony yourself. It'd be great to get you interacting with Tony, or I can ask on your behalf if you haven't got a camera, or if you'd rather just ask privately, and I can put that question to you. So if you do want to be completely anonymous, send me a private note. So I am B4, just so you know. It says Richard Rosso on there. Select me on the drop down and put your question to me, and I can ask anonymously. So away you go, Tony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Well, what I'm sort of looking at today in terms of the investment in team is that the biggest and most important investment every business makes, both financially and emotionally, is in their teams. There may be bigger individual costs when you look at terms of freehold buildings, plant and machinery, and this type of thing. But I'm talking here about investment, not just the cost entry in your accounts. And the beating heart of any company is its people. The emotional involvement is what brings the pain and reward associated with your business team. And although there is pain, because people are people and they can be not as queer as folk, as they say at times, it also brings you the huge rewards. And certainly, I would say as a business owner, one of the biggest rewards I get from my business is watching people grow and develop as part of the business and with a team, and watching the team spirit develop. And it's also proven in many different publications and demonstrated that companies that not only survive but thrive are those that invest time and money in building and retaining their people and create a team. And there are many books and publications out there on this. One of the ones that I particularly like is Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, which is a really, really good read on team building and so on. And I think this has never been more relevant now than with the pressures created by the COVID-19 crisis. And with this in mind, that's what I wanted to talk today about, how teams can be built, protected and retained, and how this is going to be crucial as and when the lockdown is lifted and people return to some normal sense of working. When I talk about protecting the investment in terms of teams, and I think you got to go right back to basics on this. And then the first part of this is what you have in your business plan in terms of how you're developing your business and how the team fit into this. And very often when I'm talking about business planning with people and you get to the people section, then they just keep focusing on the cost, what the payroll cost is going to be. And that's not what it should be about. When you're doing your business planning, you should be looking at how, as you want your business to grow, what the needs of that business is going to be, what the different requirements are going to be, so that your business plan should look to cover the makeup and structure of your team, what type of people you're going to need, where you're going to need them, when you're going to need them, and then right at the end of that comes the cost. But you need that built into your business plan. What you then need to do is you need to make sure that the business plan is communicated right down to the team. It's no good having a wonderful plan if nobody's really sure what it is you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. And that means with your sharing with your team what your key targets and KPIs are, what you're trying to achieve, whether it's on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, so they know what you're striving towards. Then you have to make sure, in terms of what you're looking at with your team, is that within your plan, you've actually got the proper training in place. And when I talk about training, I'm not just talking about on-the-job training. I'm not just talking, for instance, with CRM, where we train people to qualify as accountants. We've got to look at much more training than that, because we're asking people to go into specific roles and specific jobs. They might need additional training, training around listening, communication, presentation skills, and all this sort of thing. And you need to be prepared to give that and offer that into your team. Because with a lot of cases, when you're asking people to do these things, you're asking them to go out of their comfort zone. And you can only do this if you're giving them proper support and proper training. Then, as part of your team planning and as part of your overall business planning, you've got to make sure that you're matching rewards with expectations, because it really is not always about the money. A lot of people, everybody needs the money. They need the finances. They need to survive and pay their bills. But it's the emotional rewards and satisfaction that people get out of the job, which is often far, far more important. And you've got to make sure that you're putting together proper packages that suit individual people, because one size does not fit all. And really small things can make a difference when you're looking at what you're providing for your team and how you're taking into account the individual needs of members in your team. And this is where I think one of the really important things is that you really do need to invest in HR. It's something that over the years, as a lot of people I'm working with in early stages of business will sort of dismiss as, well, we don't know, that's not for us, we're too small. You're never too small. You don't need to have an in-house HR person. There are plenty of outsourcing places you can go to, but if you haven't got that proper facility within your business to deal with the people in your business, especially when you have a problem, then you are really going to run into trouble. HR is a really important investment in your business to support your team. And then you need to make sure that there's a clear progression path within the business so that people can see where it is that they can go with the business, how they can develop and grow with the business, and actually see there's a future in it for them. And this can even be to the extent whereby you want to build business continuity, planning for succession within the business if that is appropriate. And there are many tools that you can use to do this, such as share option schemes and this sort of thing, that allow people to have a stake in the business going forward, to have them to know that they've got something in the future planned for them, and making clear what is available to people. And the whole thing around this is communication. They say it's good to talk, but it's even better to listen. And I mean listen properly, not just hear the words, but actually listen to what people are saying to you and take it on board, because the feedback that you will get from your team about your business is so, so important and can be of immense benefit to when you are running your business. Because they're the people they're at the coalface. They're actually seeing what's happening. Sometimes you can be a little bit removed and you think everything's going okay, but it's not until they point something out to you that you realize that you haven't quite got it right and you need to tweak it. And this is why it is very important to listen to what the team say, especially when it comes around to reviews and doing the one-on-one individual reviews with people, because it's all very well sending out all these nice, touchy-feely, fluffy questionnaires with all these lovely questions about where do you want to be in a year and what do you want to do and how are you feeling. If you then don't, if you ignore what they tell you, if you don't listen to what they say in the reviews, then it's more than just a waste of time. It's very frustrating. And the next time you send out your touchy-feely questionnaire, there's going to be a lot of cutting and pasting going on, and you'll get the same answers that you got last time. And that's not really going to help you very much. So you really do need to listen to what your team is saying, use their feedback and invest that back into your business, because they are, as I say, they're at the coalface. They know exactly what's going on, and they're the ones that are often best placed to tell you where the business needs to be heading. And also, if they feel that they're being listened to, if they feel that they're being heard and they feel more involved, then I think that helps to keep the passion within the business for everybody. So I think what this sort of brings me on to now is that obviously I'm quite passionate about this stuff, about protection of the teams and building the teams, and it is your most important asset in investment. So if restrictions are lifted, which we don't know about yet, we won't know until Sunday when we've been given some sort of announcement, what is going to happen? Well, I think the first thing to consider is that easing of lockdown is a separate issue to ending furlough for people. And there seems to be a lot of belief going around at the moment that when lockdown ends, furlough ends. Well, that's not necessarily the case. With a restriction on the lockdown provisions doesn't necessarily mean that all businesses are going to be able to return to normal. And some, possibly, dependent on the level of restrictions are lifted, won't be able to return at all. And we'll have to, at the moment, the furlough provision scheme is in until the end of June. Whether it'll be extended or not remains to be seen. But just because lockdown restrictions are made or lifted, then that doesn't necessarily mean that furlough will be. And I think it's important to communicate to these people who are furloughed so that they do understand this. So they're not sat there listening to the announcement on Sunday and thinking, well, that's great. In a couple of days, I'm going to be back in the office. Because I think the big issue is that most businesses will find a return to anything close to normal trading to be much slower than anticipated. And you're going to have the situation we currently, with many workers who are on furlough, which will have been a really strange experience for them and perhaps not that pleasant. And there will be a level of anxiety about what their future employment prospects are. And reassurance from business owners is difficult at the moment because business owners simply, they don't know what lies ahead and will be reluctant to make promises they cannot deliver. So we got this situation, there's a lot of stress and anxiety out there. And when workers are called back from furlough, there may well be the expectation that they hit the ground running straight away and continue working as they did before. Well, I don't believe this is either fair or realistic. This will be especially true if communication is not maintained between the business and employees during the furlough period. In this case, anxiety levels will increase, and when the call to return is made, the employee is likely to have many questions to ask and feel anything but ready to go back to work as normal. There will also be the impact for many of going from isolation, whatever level they experience this, to being back in the social mix of the workplace. And the pent-up frustration will be quick to emerge in workplace conversations, and that may not always be positive. And this is going to create a little bit of tension with the business owner that is desperate to get back to profitable trading. And the last thing they want is a returning workforce more interested in conversation than getting on with the job. So with this stress and tension on both sides, I can see the potential for conflict is there. So again, this is why communication is absolutely vital during the period of furlough, and communicating how the return is going to happen and how it's going to work. During furlough, I think businesses that have been just practicing just a simple email each week, updating on what is going on in the business, or just a general update, it's useful to relieve that feeling of isolation and make people think that they feel that they still have a connection with the business. And there's really not a lot of excuse these days for not using technology to stay in touch. Online meetings are relatively easy to arrange. And as I say, by email as well, it's fairly easy to stay in communication with people. And there's also, I think businesses you have to consider the responsibility that you've got to your workers that are furloughed, particularly those that are vulnerable or those that are actually living on their own. I think it's very, very important that the focus is on those people, because, I mean, isolation for me has been a bit odd because I'm in a house with 5 people and a dog, and it doesn't feel very isolated most of the time. But if you're living on your own in a flat somewhere, I mean, I don't think this would have been a particularly nice experience. And as a business owner and employer, you do have a responsibility to look after these people and make sure that they are well. It's all about mental well-being these days as much as it is about physical well-being. The other thing that I think is going to be that business owners really do need to start thinking about now, if we are going to get any lifting of the restrictions, well, when we get some lifting of restrictions, is how the return to work is going to be managed. How is social distancing in the workplace going to be followed? And this may be challenging for many businesses to cope with. I've been having conversations with one particular business this week about they have a warehouse, putting down markings on the floor in the warehouse, similar to how the supermarkets are doing it. So everybody is 2 meters apart. Works in the warehouse. When you come to their office, it's much harder. So how are you going to do this? How are you going to organize your office? You may have to move desks to keep people 2 meters apart. You may need to have screens between people. You may need to consider having a one-way system in and out of buildings so that people aren't crossing in corridors. And this all could be quite complicated for businesses that have never really had to look at anything like this before. You could also consider splitting teams into shifts so that you haven't got as many people in the building at any one point in time, and you haven't got this crossing of people in corridors that I just referred to, which can be quite a problem. You're going to need to put things in place like hand sanitizers. Well, you try getting hold of those at the moment. That's not so easy. And possibly also other personal protection equipment that you may have to consider for your staff. And one of the problems that's going to come in here, as far as I can see, is if businesses start trying to get hold of PPE equipment, the danger is it's then pulling it away from the medical resources that need it. And I think that's got to be sort of managed quite carefully. This is obviously all subject to how the restrictions are lifted, but if you don't start thinking about it now, if we have an announcement on Sunday which says we're lifting restrictions to this extent, these businesses can start back, well, you're not going to be starting back on the Monday because that's going to be too late to be telling anybody. And even if you want to do it during the course of that week, how quickly can you get all of this sort of thing organized? Because I think the really big important thing here is making sure that your employees, when they do return, are comfortable that they're returning to a safe environment and that you've taken their personal safety into consideration. I was reading a report already this morning that some union organizations are saying that if this isn't done in certain industries, then they will stop people returning to work, which is going to be an absolute disaster if we have this type of conflict, because a lot of businesses are struggling with the economic effects of this. Safety of individuals has to come first, but if we have this sort of conflict, it's going to be very serious, and it just needs to be managed by proper communication. So the businesses need to be saying to people, you're coming back to work, but this is different. It's not going to be like it was before, and this is what you need to be aware of, and this is what you need to do. So this sort of comes on to, again, we're back to the C word again, communication. When it does come to the end of bringing people back from furlough, I personally think that this has to be one-on-one communication. Now, it's difficult for some companies that have a large number of employees, but again, this is where your HR resource is hugely, hugely important, because what you need to be doing is you need to be speaking to the people who are coming back off furlough, explaining to them how they're being brought back, what has changed, what's going to be different when they come back into the work environment, dealing with the questions they have. And in larger organizations where you have a larger workforce and the business owner can't speak to them all individually, it's just not physically possible, they have to make sure that there's a clear message, clear and consistent message coming down the line so that everybody's hearing the same thing. and the answers to the questions are as consistent as possible, so that when everybody comes back, they have a comfortable feeling that they understand what's going on and they understand what's different about their workplace. And I think this is all going to be quite difficult for most businesses to manage and quite challenging, because it's just not something that people have ever done before. I do think that in terms of getting people back, there's communication. I think before you get natural return into the workplace, it would be a good idea to get people together in more of a social environment. Now, this, you may well not be able to do that in terms of a meeting, because you simply may not be able to do that, but you could have some sort of online meeting where you have the opportunity for people that have been furloughed and those that have still been in the business to come together again in more of a conversation area. So a lot of the questions and concerns and problems that people have got can be brought out there rather than on the day when they actually try and return to work. And hopefully this will make the return to work a lot smoother and give a better environment to deal with any grievances in. Because I do think we're coming into a very challenging period. As lockdown ends, we're not coming back to normal trading. It's going to be a long, long time before we see a normal business environment. And all these sort of things that we need to get in place about how we're going to work, those could be with us for many, many months. So that they need to be thought about now, not thought about on the morning that you decide to bring people back. Which is why I think now you've made the investment in your team, you've now got to start investing in really, really good communication to make sure that you've got a clear, consistent message going across to people, and people understand what the new working environment is going to be like when they come back from furlough, when they start working again. Because it's always the same old problem. If you're not protecting and looking after your team members, those valued members of your company, there's always somebody else that's going to be interested in looking after them. So it really is vital and important. And I think now, as I say, it really is more important than it's ever been to get these things right as much as we possibly can. So I'm more than happy now to take any questions if anybody has any.
Sorry, Tony. Right. Questions, anybody? Is anybody? I am awake. Sorry. Yeah, no, I was struggling to find. I thought I was on. Didn't realise I was on mute. Not very professional, is it? Does anybody have any questions? I don't never make myself out to be professional anyway. Anybody have any questions for Tony at all? It'd be good to hear from you. And how are you managing with your team, Tony? Just while we've got anybody wanting to unmute and come forward.
Well,
in your team, you've got a good number, haven't you? Got 20 odd?
Yeah, I mean, and we've got a good team, and they're pretty good at communicating. I think we have actually fallen down on a bit of the communication, especially in early days. We're trying to improve on that now, but I know there's a lot of communication going amongst our team members anyway. So I think there is, and we're trying to keep those on furlough in regular communication as well. But it is quite challenging when you're trying to get on with business as well. It is quite challenging.
As we had a webinar yesterday with Diane Wilkinson, and it sort of occurred to me during the discussion how it's very easy to ignore how people are feeling when you just jump onto a team meeting in the morning, when you don't see somebody face to face and pick up on maybe they might be a little bit down that particular day. You don't necessarily see that in a team meeting on a one-dimensional Zoom meeting or team meeting of some sort, and it's difficult. It's easy just to pop out of that meeting and leave everybody to their devices, and not actually have those one-to-ones, which I think you reference are a good idea to find out actually how people are coping.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I don't particularly like online meetings. I prefer face-to-face, where you can actually, you can assess body language and so on, and how people really are with these things. Just a little square in the corner doesn't really allow you to sort of look closely at somebody and see how they're reacting and how they're feeling.
Exactly. Tony, we've got Chris. Chris, I don't know whether you want to come on. I know you got a dash at 10:30, but whether you want to come on or you want me to ask on your behalf. No? Okay. So Chris's question, Tony, I know you referenced furlough and possible drawing to an end of that particular scheme, but what's your personal feeling? Would it no longer be available after 30th of June?
I personally think that it probably won't extend beyond the 30th of June. I think purely from a cost perspective, the amount of people being put through the furlough scheme is huge, and the cost to the Treasury is going to be massive. I personally don't think it will get extended much beyond the end of June, if at all.
Okay, thanks for that. Colin, did you want to come and ask your question about remote working and what your team's going to be doing, Tony?
Yeah. Hello, Tony.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
Okay, I don't think you can see me, but there you go. I'm not quite conquered this yet.
It's only been 6 weeks. Don't worry, you've got plenty of time.
Right.
I'm surprised you managed to connect, Dad. I mean, that's pretty good going.
I just wondered if any of your team are going to continue remote working, or are you going to be absolutely back to normal, do you think?
I think that's a really interesting question.
Especially when he's got half his team listening, Dad.
Yeah, thanks for that, Colin. No, I think it's a really good question. We were talking about it last week. I think there are going to be people that are going to say, the remote working worked for us. We want to continue with that when we go forward. I'm happy to look at it. I mean, I really do miss being in the office and working with the team. And I think there's a lot that goes on within the office. There's a lot of shared experiences in the office that I find really useful, and I certainly miss with home working. But I think that I think a lot of businesses are actually going to look at it, especially businesses that are renting very expensive office space in London are going to look at this and say, well, we actually operated quite well during this period. We actually don't need to be renting all that office space now. And I think you might get people in those circumstances certainly considering it and saying, we're going to go for a lot more of home working. As for CRM, we'll look at it and we'll consider it, and it might be something that we do on a limited basis, but I do think the interaction of the team is very, very important for us.
There was a previous webinar, Tony, I don't know if you saw it, but there were some statistics about the numbers of actual work you got out of staff in offices, and it was incredible. They asked us to guess out of 6 hours. Most people guessed at 5 or 6. The answer was under 3 hours. Absolutely staggering.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, and I think personally, from my perspective, I've got no doubt that the people in CRM who are still working are working really hard at the moment, and they're working long hours. I believe they're working more than their hours that they normally would. But I do know in some of the other companies I've been involved with, there is the feeling that working from home is a bit of an oxymoron. And really, I think that is a difficult one. And a lot of that comes down to what relationship you have with your team, to be perfectly honest.
Fair enough, yeah.
Did hear from somebody the other day.
You particularly, Tony, not to CRM.
Did hear from somebody the other day saying about how some people are actually more productive later on in the day or even in the evening, and some people, at their most productive at 9 o'clock at night. And
yeah, I mean that's another good point, and that is another point about the home working. And I've noticed it. I mean, I've been getting emails from our team quite late at night, and I've been quite surprised when I've been sending out emails at sort of 7 o'clock in the morning, and I get a reply straight away, and I think, oh crikey. So that's something about home working that does, it does help people to fit in with their personal circumstances and just the way they work. And I know that there's a couple of people in our team at the moment, they're having a problem with childcare. So I know that they're fitting around during the day when they've got children, they can't get the work done. So they're doing evenings and weekends. My view on that is, as long as people are delivering what you need them to deliver, then I'm quite happy with that.
I think Emma's just found the time delay on Outlook, and sending emails at 11 o'clock at night just look like she's busy. Is that right, Emma? She's laughing.